Ice doesn't forgive. It takes quietly, swiftly, without remorse. On mornings like this, when the cold Minneapolis air cuts deep enough to numb your bones, most folks keep their heads down and their hearts locked tight. But every now and then, fate whispers in your ear and forces your hand. He heard her screams first, a raw, desperate sound slicing through the frozen silence, shattering his morning routine like glass. Without hesitation, he ran onto the cracking ice, each step a gamble with death, every breath a quiet prayer. He had no idea who she was or what darkness chased her into the lake's freezing embrace. All he knew was that beneath his feet, the ice was fracturing, and soon, so would his carefully guarded world. Because sometimes one act of courage or madness can change everything. Henry Cooper woke before dawn as he always did, the cold Minneapolis air drifting through the thin walls of his modest apartment. At 58, he felt every ache of his years, the stiffness in his right knee, the dull throb in his shoulder from an old injury. Yet he rose without complaint, slipping into routine like an old habit. Henry was an early riser not by nature but by necessity. As a former Army mechanic, he had discipline ingrained in his bones. As a single father, he had no choice. His 8-year-old daughter, Lucy, still slept in the next room, lulled by the soft whistle of the radiator that sometimes sputtered and clanged. He kept meaning to fix it after all. He was good at fixing things. But for now, the noise didn't bother Lucy, so it could wait. He dressed quietly in the cramped hallway, pulling on worn jeans and an old flannel. The hallway light flickered above his head, another fixture on his endless to-do list. Money was tight these days, especially since Lucy's mother had passed 5 years ago. Cancer, the doctors had said, a diagnosis that devoured their savings in mere months. Henry remembered the day he sold his best tools in a small fishing boat inherited from his father, all to keep the medical bills at bay. He never once regretted it, only wished he could have done more. Now it was just him and Lucy, surviving on his maintenance job at the local municipal building by day and a part-time shift at a mechanic's garage 3 evenings a week. In the small kitchen, he flipped on the lone overhead bulb to make breakfast. Instant oatmeal for Lucy, black coffee for himself. A quarter loaf of bread sat on the counter, next to a near-empty jar of peanut butter lunch for Lucy, if he rationed it right. He'd grab something quick on the way to his shift, maybe a day-old pastry from the corner bakery. Even if his back ached and he worried about the next round of bills, Henry refused to wallow. He had Lucy, and that was enough. He stirred his coffee, half wishing it were strong enough to mask the fatigue in his bones. His mind drifted to the day ahead, a list of maintenance requests at the municipal building, fixing broken doorknobs, replacing flickering lights, unclogging restrooms. Then, after a short break to pick Lucy up from school and drop her at Miss Alvarez's apartment across the hall, he'd hurry to the garage for a 4-hour shift. If he was lucky, he'd be home by 10, maybe read Lucy a bedtime story if she was still awake. He tried to be there for her in ways big and small, but the demands of rent, groceries, and a child growing out of her winter coat too quickly wore on his conscience. It was never enough time, never enough money. Henry took a sip of coffee, thinking of the budget. He'd already accepted that Lucy would get second-hand clothes for a while. She never complained, only smiled that bright, gap-toothed grin that made his heart pinch. Someday, he told himself, he'd find a better opportunity. Someday, they wouldn't have to scrounge, but for now, dawn was breaking. And it was time to wake Lucy and start the day unaware that this particular day would upend both of their lives in ways he could never imagine. By the time Lucy stirred, Henry had already slipped into his boots and shrugged on a heavy coat. Minneapolis in January offered no mercy. The biting cold seemed to sneak through any gap in his worn-down clothing. He helped Lucy into her bright pink jacket secondhand, but cherished, and they headed out into the early morning darkness. Their apartment building faced a small park, blanketed in frost. Usually, Henry and Lucy would cut across the park toward the main road. But Lucy had been begging to see Lake Harriet for weeks. She'd drawn it in her coloring books, fascinated by the idea that a lake could freeze so solid people might walk on it. Since Henry started work early today, he decided to indulge her just this once. They took a detour, trudging through fresh powder toward the lake's edge. Street lights cast long, ghostly shadows, and Lucy marveled at the white, unbroken snow that coated the benches and dock. Henry hadn't meant to go too close to the water, but Lucy was enthralled. She hopped along, testing each footstep, giggling when the snow crunched beneath her boots. Henry kept a watchful eye, ready to scold her if she ventured onto unsafe ice. He spotted a no trespassing on ice sign half buried in snow, the official warnings overshadowed by nature's quiet majesty. Then he heard the scream faint, desperate, cutting through the still air. At first, Henry froze, unsure if his fatigued mind was playing tricks. But Lucy heard it too. She tugged on his sleeve, her eyes wide as saucers. Another scream echoed, bouncing off the vast emptiness of the frozen lake. Without hesitation, Henry told Lucy to stay put on the shore and sprinted across the snow. He followed the sound, adrenaline pounding in his ears, until he spotted a figure frantically clawing at the edge of a jagged hole in the ice. Ice rescues had been part of his army training, though he'd rarely had to apply it. Still, the old instincts kicked in. He looked around for anything that might help. No rope, no life buoys, no bystanders. Kneeling, he inched forward, pressing his weight as evenly as possible on the slick surface. The woman's face was pale and terrified, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She reached out a trembling hand, eyes locking onto Henry's. He saw raw fear in them, and something else, a plea not just for survival, but for a chance to escape whatever had brought her here. Henry bellied across the ice, ignoring the biting cold seeping into his gloves. He extended one arm. "Take my hand," he shouted. For a terrifying moment, the ice groaned, cracks spiderweb beneath him. Henry felt water seep through his coat sleeves. With one powerful yank, he pulled the woman's arm across the edge of the ice. But she was numb, barely able to grip him back. His body screamed in protest as he mustered the strength to heave her out. The ice gave way more, soaking his legs. Somehow, he kept her from slipping back into the dark water. She coughed, choking on air, her hair plastered to her face in stiff, freezing strands. With desperate determination, Henry scooted them both back onto thicker ice, then rose and half-carried, half-dragged her toward the shore. Lucy ran to meet them, her breath hitching as she saw the woman's soaked clothes and blue-tinged lips. "Daddy," Lucy cried, tears in her voice. Henry collapsed to his knees, the weight of the rescue hitting him all at once, the brutal cold stabbing through his wet pants. He checked the woman's pulse, still there, but faint. She shivered violently, barely conscious. As sirens sounded in the distance, Henry could only think, thank God she's alive. He had no way of knowing who she really was, or how this moment would change all their lives forever. Henry refused ambulance transport for himself. Though paramedics insisted, he simply handed the woman over, letting them load her onto a stretcher and secure an oxygen mask over her nose and mouth. She mumbled something, her eyes fluttering, but Henry couldn't make it out. Lucy tugged at his coat, worried. A paramedic quickly checked Henry's vitals, advising him to seek medical attention and to keep warm. But Henry was more concerned about Lucy, who was shivering despite her thick jacket and the excitement of the rescue. Once he assured the medical team he'd be fine, they took off, red and blue lights cutting through the snowy dawn. The chaos dissipated as quickly as it had begun, leaving Henry and Lucy alone on the shore. He exhaled a shaky breath, realizing he was soaked from the waist down. Lucy reached into her pocket and handed him her small knitted scarf. Her face was pale with worry. "Are you okay, Daddy?" she asked, voice quivering. He nodded, draping the tiny scarf around his neck, more for comfort than warmth. He felt the adrenaline draining from his body, leaving behind a deep fatigue. "I'm okay, sweet pea." He lied gently, guiding her away from the thin ice and back onto solid ground. They were late, obviously, and Henry's phone buzzed with messages from his supervisor. Normally, he'd be worried about losing precious work hours, but saving a life offered a dose of perspective. He glanced back at the lake once, Seeing fresh cracks and the hole where the woman had fallen through, a wave of relief mingled with shock. Who was she? Why had she been out there alone, in the cold? At such an early hour, the paramedics hadn't asked him many questions yet, presumably planning to follow up later. Henry shrugged it off. He had no answers to give. He bundled Lucy into his old sedan, a car that often groaned louder than he did in the morning, and cranked the heat. Lucy was uncharacteristically silent for most of the ride, her gaze fixed on the frost-laced window. Eventually, she spoke. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Henry's heart clenched at the worry in her voice. "I hope so," he said simply. He glanced in the rearview mirror at her. Even at 8, Lucy carried a gentle wisdom that sometimes made him feel both proud and sad. She had lost her mother at such a young age, seen him struggle more than any child should. Yet she always found something kind to say, some ray of hope to hold on to. When they finally arrived at the municipal building, Henry hustled Lucy to the small security desk by the entrance. "Andy, do me a huge favor. Watch her for 5 minutes while I change," he asked the guard, an old friend from his army days. Andy took one look at Henry's drenched pants and frowned. "What the heck happened?" Henry only shook his head. Long story, in a cramped staff bathroom, he peeled off the freezing clothing and changed into spare work pants he kept in his locker. The building's ancient heaters hissed, reminding him of how grateful he was for any warmth. As he clocked in an hour late, no doubt docking his pay, he caught Lucy's eye across the lobby. She gave him a small, encouraging smile that melted him more thoroughly than the heaters ever could. He ruffled her hair, wondering how to explain what had happened. Or if he should, maybe the less said, the better, he told himself. Little did he know that in a matter of hours, the entire city would know exactly who had been pulled from Lake Harriet by a quiet, unassuming janitor named Henry Cooper. Anna Reed woke to the steady beep of hospital machinery and the antiseptic scent of disinfectant. Her eyelids felt heavy, her body numb except for a dull ache in her lungs. She blinked slowly, disoriented by the harsh fluorescent light overhead. A nurse noticed she was awake and rushed over, pressing a series of buttons to check her vitals. The nurse's voice was gentle as she introduced herself, but Anna could barely focus. Her head pounded with fragmented memories, the cold sting of icy water, panic clawing at her throat, and then a pair of strong arms pulling her upward. She tried to speak, but her voice came out raspy. "Where? Who?" The nurse understood her unasked question. "You fell through the ice at Lake Harriet. A passerby rescued you. You're lucky to be alive," she said, adjusting Anna's IV drip. Anna closed her eyes, relief warring with a strange sense of dread. Lucky to be alive, she wasn't sure if that was entirely true. She'd run to the lake's deserted shore at dawn precisely because she didn't want to be found. At least not by the people hunting her. But clearly, fate had other plans. Not long after, a stern-looking man in a tailored suit walked in, accompanied by a swirl of hospital staff. Anna's heart sank. She recognized the imposing figure Christopher Reed, her older brother, the CEO of Reed Industries, the caretaker of the family legacy ever since their father's stroke. "Anna," Christopher said, as if her name were a rebuke. She noticed he didn't rush to her side or embrace her. Instead, he handed the nurse a business card and asked about her condition with clipped precision. His eyes flicked over her, assessing, more concerned with potential scandal than her actual well-being. She turned her face away, tears threatening. 6 months ago, she'd disappeared from the glittering corridors of wealth and power. She'd walked away from board meetings and charity galas, from carefully curated press releases, and a fiancé she had never truly loved. She'd taken only a small stash of cash and a few personal items. But she couldn't outrun the weight of her own name for long. Now she was stuck in a hospital bed, found by the very rescue she had neither expected nor asked for. Christopher's voice lowered as the nurse stepped out. "We've been searching for you. You have no idea the lengths I've gone to keep this quiet." "Where have you been?" Anna pressed her lips together. "Just away," she managed, her voice weak but her resolve firm. She wouldn't tell him about the tiny rented loft in a working-class neighborhood, The part-time job at a secondhand bookstore, or the nightly walk she took around the lake just to feel normal, to feel free. "You're coming home," Christopher stated. "We'll spin this as exhaustion or a private sabbatical. The board will understand." "Father is worried sick." Anna shook her head, a spark of defiance flashing in her eyes. "I'm not going back," she whispered. But Christopher ignored her. He looked down at his phone, scrolling through messages. "We need to find the man who rescued you. The press wants a statement." Anna's heart clenched. The man who saved her deserved better than to be consumed by tabloids or her family's PR machine. "Leave him out of it," she pleaded, voice cracking. But Christopher didn't respond. He simply walked out to make a call, leaving Anna feeling more trapped than when she'd been under the ice. On his lunch break, Henry retreated to a rarely used storage room in the municipal building to avoid the sudden flurry of attention. A coworker had shoved a newspaper under his nose that morning, pointing to the front page, "Unknown Hero Rescues Missing Heiress Anna Reid in Lake Harriet Drama." The story was accompanied by a grainy cell phone photo of the paramedics by the shore. The article stated Anna was the sole heir of the Reid Industries empire worth billions, rumored to be engaged, and inexplicably missing for half a year. Now she was found, rescued by an unnamed Good Samaritan. Henry's phone wouldn't stop buzzing calls from unknown numbers, texts from coworkers. Even Ms. Alvarez had sent him a voicemail, squealing about how they were on the news. He read Lucy's short text from Ms. Alvarez's phone. "Daddy, you're a superhero. Are you okay?" He wanted to reassure her, but he felt overwhelmed. He'd never asked for this kind of spotlight. All he had done was the right thing, something any decent person would do. But apparently the world and Anna's influential family disagreed. Just as he managed to compose a quick reply to Lucy, the door to the storage room swung open. Detective Grace Park, a petite woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, stepped inside. "Mr. Cooper," she said, her tone polite but firm. Henry stood up, feeling a jolt of anxiety. His run-ins with law enforcement had been minimal, mostly parking tickets. "I'm not in trouble, am I?" he asked, half joking. Grace gave a faint smile. "Not at all. I just need your statement about what happened at the lake." Henry rubbed the back of his neck. "I already told the paramedics everything. I heard a scream. I pulled her out." Grace nodded, folding her arms. "And after that, the paramedics said you refused further questions." He shrugged. "I had to get to work." She studied him, eyes flicking to his uniform. "This woman you rescued, Anna Reid, is a high-profile figure. Her brother wants to thank you personally. They're talking about a press conference. A reward. Henry scoffed. The idea was almost offensive to him. "I don't need money for doing the right thing." Grace's expression remained neutral. "Be that as it may, the Reids are persistent, and the media is hungry. It might be better to get ahead of it instead of letting rumors spiral." Henry pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a headache coming on. "I don't want Lucy dragged into any public circus," he muttered. "She's just a kid." He paused, then asked softly, "How's Miss Reid? Is she okay?" Grace's gaze softened slightly. "She's stable, still in the hospital, though security is tight, since her disappearance made waves. It's unusual for someone in her position to vanish for so long." Henry said nothing, but he sensed the detective's unspoken question. Why did she run? He didn't have the answer, and part of him didn't want to know. All that mattered was that she'd survived. "If you need more details, you know where to find me," Henry said at last. Grace slipped him her card. "Call me if the Reids or their lawyers start pressuring you, or if the media makes your life miserable. I'm here to help." She left with a polite nod, and Henry sank onto a dusty crate. He stared at the detective's card, torn between relief that Anna Reid was okay and dread at the looming storm. The clock on the wall ticked away his lunch break, reminding him he still had a second job to get to that evening. He pocketed the card, telling himself he'd never need to use it. A few days later, Henry stood at the chain-link fence that separated the backyard of Miss Alvarez's ground-floor apartment from a narrow alley. The sun had set, and Lucy was inside helping Ms. Alvarez baked cookies for a school fundraiser. The warm, sugary smell wafted through the open window, mingling with the crisp winter air. Henry had stepped out for a breather. He felt on edge, waiting for the next wave of phone calls or reporters. The news cycle had only intensified. Anna Reed was out of the hospital now. Rumor said everyone wanted a picture, an interview, a statement. The squeal of car tires in the alley made him tense up. A sleek black SUV inched forward, headlights illuminating Henry's hunched figure. For a second, he thought it was the press. Instead, the passenger window rolled down to reveal a man with perfectly styled hair and a forbidding expression, Christopher Reed. Henry recognized him from the newspaper photos Anna's older brother, the newly minted CEO of Reed Industries. Another man, probably a bodyguard, sat at the wheel. "Mr. Cooper?" Christopher asked, voice smooth but clipped. Henry said nothing, just gave a slight nod. Christopher stepped out, not bothering with gloves or a scarf even in the frigid air. He extended a hand, though his posture suggested an air of authority rather than gratitude. "I came to thank you on behalf of my family for rescuing Anna. I understand you've been reluctant to speak with the media." Henry simply stared at the offered handshake, finally gripping it briefly. "I'm not in it for the publicity," he said. Christopher's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes, so I've heard. But you must understand, my sister's disappearance and sudden reappearance have created complications." He took a measured breath. "I've arranged a press conference for tomorrow. We'd appreciate you attending. Making a brief statement, it would help quell the chaos." Henry felt irritation flare in his chest. "I have no interest in a press conference, and I'm working 2 jobs just to pay rent and keep my daughter clothed. I did what I had to do when I heard screams. That's all." Christopher regarded him with a cool gaze, then motioned to the SUV. The driver stepped out, reaching into the trunk and pulling out a polished leather briefcase. "My family believes in showing gratitude," Christopher continued. "And here is a check that could—" Henry raised a hand to cut him off. "No," he said flatly. He could imagine the amount inside, possibly enough to cover Lucy's college tuition or more. But he hated the idea of accepting money for saving a life. More than that, he hated the idea of being owned by the Reeds. "I'm not for sale," he said quietly, but firmly. Christopher's jaw twitched. "Don't be melodramatic. This is just a token. My sister is quite grateful. She insisted on extending this gesture." Henry noticed the bodyguard shifting uncomfortably, and Miss Alvarez's curtains fluttered inside as she peered out, curious about the visitors. "Finally, Val," Henry spoke. "Tell Anna I'm glad she's okay. But please, leave us in peace." He turned on his heel and ducked inside, locking the door behind him. He leaned against the door, heart pounding. Ms. Alvarez appeared, flour dusting her apron, worry in her eyes. "Henry, who was that?" He managed a tight smile, ruffling Lucy's hair as she poked her head around the corner. "Wrong address." He lied softly, but the sense of finality in his words rang hollow. He knew better. Men like Christopher Reed never just walk away when told no. 1 week later, Henry stood at the edge of Lucy's elementary school parking lot, scanning the faces of parents and teachers bustling past. He rarely got to pick her up at this time of day, but he'd switched a shift at the garage. The impetus was a phone call from Detective Grace Park, apparently. Rumor had it Christopher Reed was considering a legal route to force Henry's cooperation in the press. Grace didn't have many details, but the warning was enough to rattle him. As the final bell rang, Lucy burst out the doors, her backpack swinging side to side. She spotted Henry and lit up. "Daddy," she squealed, racing toward him. He knelt down, arms open, grateful for the normalcy of her small embrace. That brief moment of peace vanished when he noticed a tall figure standing by a lamppost in the distance. Anna Reed herself, wrapped in a plain wool coat, hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She looked different than the photographs that had circulated. No designer clothes, no entourage. Her gaze darted anxiously as if she feared cameras lurking in every shadow. Lucy pointed. "Is that the lady from the lake?" Henry's stomach tightened. He nodded slowly, gently guiding Lucy toward the car. But Anna approached, tentative. "I'm sorry," she began, stopping a few feet away. Her breath formed small clouds in the chilly air. "I didn't know how else to find you. I thought you might be here picking up your daughter." Henry stood, protective. He took in her appearance, heavy circles under her eyes, a slight tremor in her fingers. If she was a billionaire heiress, she was hiding it well. "Anna, right," he said, his voice cautious. Lucy, always more direct, tugged on Henry's sleeve. "You're okay," she said, bright-eyed but shy. Anna gave her a small smile. "Yes, thanks to your dad. I owe you both more than you can imagine." Henry glanced around, worried about onlookers. "We should go somewhere else to talk." He didn't want Lucy exposed to a potential media storm in the schoolyard. Anna nodded eagerly. "Anywhere you feel safe." Against his better judgment, Henry offered a short drive to a nearby cafe, one mostly frequented by retirees and truckers, the kind of place where he hoped cameras wouldn't lurk. They ended up in a vinyl booth at the back, Lucy sipping hot cocoa while Henry and Anna nursed coffees. Anna explained in a hushed tone why she'd run the corporate life, an impending marriage arranged more for business than love, a father too ill to notice, and a brother too wrapped up in the company's image. She had felt suffocated, craving a simpler existence. For months, she lived under a pseudonym, working part-time at a bookstore, discovering normalcy for the first time. "I went to the lake that morning because it was quiet. I didn't think I just stepped on the ice. It was so foolish," she said, eyes downcast. Lucy took her hand unexpectedly. "I'm glad you're okay," the girl repeated. Anna squeezed Lucy's hand, tears brimming in her eyes. "Henry, I'm sorry my family's harassing you. You have no idea how controlling Christopher can be. I tried to tell him to leave you alone." Henry shrugged, torn between empathy and frustration. "He offered me money, a lot of it, I'm guessing." Anna's face fell. "I wish he hadn't done that. I wanted to thank you in my own way, not throw money at you like you're on his payroll." She paused, her voice trembling. "He's threatened you, hasn't he?" Henry didn't lie. "He's talking about some legal angle, something about forcing me to appear at events. I just want to live my life." Anna looked at Lucy, who stirred her cocoa with a plastic spoon, quiet but alert. She then turned back to Henry. "What if I can help? I know it sounds absurd, but I can push back against Christopher. I have some leverage of my own." Henry studied her carefully, seeing not the wealthy heiress, but a fragile young woman yearning for freedom, and oddly enough, for belonging. "We'll figure it out," he heard himself say. Lucy slipped her small hand into Anna's, forging a bridge Henry couldn't have anticipated. Outside, the winter wind howled, but inside that cramped booth, something warm and unmistakably genuine took root. That night, as Lucy slept on a makeshift cot in Ms. Alvarez's living room, Henry and Anna sat at the small kitchen table, sharing a simple meal of reheated casserole. Ms. Alvarez hovered about, unable to hide her curiosity. She had long teased Henry about being too reclusive, too closed off since his wife's passing. Now, a mysterious young woman, beautiful, clearly well-bred, but oddly humble, sat in her kitchen, looking at Henry with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. Anna explained more about her family, about the corporate empire her father had built from scratch. "Christopher took over, most of it after our father's stroke. I was supposed to run the philanthropic division, do charity galas, smile for cameras, but I never had a say in anything real." She fiddled with her mug, the steam fogging her glasses. "And I definitely didn't want to marry the man Christopher picked out, some merger of families, beneficial for the company." Henry glanced at Ms. Alvarez, who was stirring a pot of hot chocolate on the stove, half listening. He lowered his voice. "It sounds suffocating." Anna nodded, her gaze drifting to Lucy's sleeping form. "I missed normal things like cooking my own meals, riding the bus, browsing a library. Silly, I know." Henry shook his head. "Not silly at all." For a moment, then an unspoken connection passed between them. Both had lost something important, Anna her autonomy, Henry his wife and financial stability. They were both searching for a kind of life that felt real. He broke the silence. Detective Park told me the press wants a big story. They're hounding her for leads. Anna sighed. Yes, and Christopher is fueling it, wanting to spin my return. But I told him I had only come back if he left you out of it. He won't honor that promise, though, not unless it benefits the company's public image. Miss Alvarez cleared her throat softly. Henry, you know I'm not one to meddle, but Lucy's welfare is paramount here. If this Christopher fellow is as powerful as Anna says, he might use any angle to pressure you, like calling Child Protective Services, claiming you're not providing it a stable environment. Henry's jaw tightened. He wouldn't dare. Anna bit her lip. He might. They'll do anything to keep the story tidy. If Lucy becomes a liability, they'll try to remove her from the narrative entirely. The words fell heavily in the cramped kitchen. Henry could practically feel his protective instincts coil tight. He looked at Anna. So what do we do? She exhaled slowly. I can go back under the radar, disappear again. Or I can stand up to Christopher publicly, say I'm leaving the family business on my own terms. But if I do that, the media storm could intensify before it calms down. Henry raked a hand through his hair. I don't want Lucy in the crosshairs. Ms. Alvarez served them each a small cup of hot chocolate. Family isn't just about blood, dear. Sometimes it's about standing together so no one can push you apart. Her dark eyes shifted between the two. You both survived something, Anna. You survived the ice. Henry, you survived losing your wife. Maybe it's time you help each other survive what comes next. Outside, the wind rattled the window, as if echoing Ms. Alvarez's advice. Anna sipped the hot chocolate, absorbing the warmth. Henry placed a steady hand on her shoulder, the simplest gesture of solidarity. In that ordinary moment, in a plain kitchen with mismatched cups, the seeds of a chosen family started to take root. A silent tension filled Henry's chest as he pulled into the parking lot of Meadows' garage for his night shift. Anna had offered to walk back to her temporary motel, but Ms. Alvarez insisted she stay at their place instead. The motel was prime hunting ground for paparazzi. Lucy was safe inside, coloring with Anna, while Ms. Alvarez prepared an extra blanket for their makeshift guest. Meanwhile, Henry had to clock in no matter how chaotic life became. Rent was still due. Mike, a fellow mechanic, greeted him with a knowing grin. Heard you've been busy saving billionaires, he teased. A radio in the corner crackled with a local news update. Anna Reed rumored to step away from Reed Industries after reappearing last week. Henry switched it off, not wanting to add more fuel to the rumor mill. He put on his coveralls, focusing on the job at hand, an older sedan with a failing transmission, a minivan needing brake pads replaced. Routine tasks felt oddly comforting, a break from the swirl of public intrigue. Yet even in the sanctuary of grease and metal, Henry's mind strayed to Anna and Lucy. He pictured the two of them bent over Lucy's coloring book, Lucy's face alight with childlike wonder, Anna's expression equally entranced. It was as if Anna found solace in the ordinary family rituals Henry had taken for granted: sloppy dinners, playful banter, the sense of belonging that Lucy radiated effortlessly. About halfway through his shift, Henry got a text from Ms. Alvarez. All fine here. Anna told Lucy a bedtime story. Lucy's already asleep. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. In the quiet, he remembered Anna's words about leaving her fortune behind. Could she really do that? Would Christopher let her, or was that naive thinking? A fleeting rebellion against a world of private jets and corporate deals? When his shift ended, the city slept under a fresh layer of snow. He drove home, headlights cutting through the darkness, thinking of how precarious everything felt. The press wouldn't just vanish, especially once they sniffed out Anna's location, and Christopher Reed wasn't a man to back off easily. The only real question was how far Henry was willing to go to shield Lucy from it all. Back at Ms. Alvarez's apartment, the living room lights were dim. Henry tiptoed in, noticing Anna curled up on the sofa with a thin blanket, wearing borrowed pajamas that were slightly too big for her. Her hair fanned across the pillow, face relaxed in slumber, the lines of worry smoothed away. Lucy was nowhere to be seen, presumably tucked into Ms. Alvarez's bedroom. Henry paused, struck by the oddity of the scene, the billionaire heiress asleep on a neighbor's couch, safe under his roof in a modest building that smelled of homemade tortillas and pine-scented floor cleaner. He draped another blanket over Anna, making sure she was warm. Then he settled into a rickety armchair. He was too wired to sleep. Instead, he watched the snow fall outside the window, replaying the last few days in his mind: the rescue at the lake, the persistent detective, the menacing visits from Christopher, the surprising warmth Anna showed Lucy. A tiny voice inside him whispered that he was no longer alone in this fight. Anna was determined to break free. Lucy was determined to stand by him, and Miss Alvarez was determined to keep them all fed and safe in her own motherly way. For the first time in years, Henry felt a flicker of something resembling hope, even if he still feared what dawn might bring. That dawn arrived with a flurry of phone calls. Henry woke from his half-dozing state in the armchair to the sound of Alvarez's landline ringing. He jolted upright, noticing Anna was already awake, quietly helping Lucy tie her shoes for school. Ms. Alvarez bustled in from the kitchen, pressing the phone to her chest. "Henry, it's for you. It's that detective." He rose and took the phone, heart pounding. "Cooper here." Detective Grace Park's voice crackled through. "Mr. Cooper, I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Christopher Reed's lawyers are filing a motion that questions Lucy's living environment, presumably to put pressure on you. I've seen it before. Wealthy, influential people can manipulate the system to force compliance." Henry's free hand balled into a fist. Lucy, oblivious, was laughing as Anna pretended to fuss over her shoelaces like a doting aunt. Ms. Alvarez hovered, worry evident. "Is there anything I can do?" Henry asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Grace sighed on the other end. "Make sure you have your paperwork in order: school enrollment, stable address, any references who can attest to your parenting. I'll do what I can to stall them." Henry thanked her and hung up, heart sinking. He couldn't bear the thought of Lucy being taken from him, even briefly. His mind churned, imagining social workers showing up, media swarming, Lucy's terror. Anna's gaze caught his, and she stood, instantly sensing something was wrong. "They're going after Lucy." "Aren't they?" she whispered. Henry nodded. Anna took a steadying breath. "Then we have to fight back, publicly and honestly. If we keep hiding, Christopher will paint you as irresponsible. Or worse. Let me handle the press. Let me tell them the truth. I don't want to return to Reed Industries. And you saved me without caring about my name or fortune." Henry hesitated, fear and gratitude clashing in his chest. Ms. Alvarez piped up, "Sometimes the best defense is to shine a light so they can't operate in the shadows." Lucy tugged on Henry's sleeve. "Daddy, I don't want to leave you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Henry knelt down, wrapping her in a protective hug. "No one's taking you away, Lucy. I promise." But as he said the words, uncertainty gnawed at him. He couldn't fight corporate sharks with just strong arms and an honest heart. He needed help, and Anna was offering it. So they devised a plan. Anna would contact a few sympathetic local reporters, people she knew from her philanthropic events who might be receptive to an honest angle rather than sensational headlines. They'd tell the story from Henry's and Lucy's perspective, showcasing the stable life he had built. Meanwhile, Ms. Alvarez volunteered as a character witness, ready to open her home and her heart to any social worker that might come snooping. Lucy's teacher, Ms. Gaines, would vouch for Lucy's attendance and well-being at school. By noon, Anna had made several calls, each conversation more determined than the last. She spoke passionately about Henry's kindness, Lucy's well-adjusted nature, and her own wish to remain out of the limelight. Detective Park offered to speak off the record, confirming that Henry had no criminal record and was a model citizen. Plans for a small press gathering took shape: no big conference or fancy stage, just a quiet meeting in the school auditorium after hours. That evening, Lucy went to bed early, uncharacteristically subdued. Henry found Anna in the living room, staring at her phone. "Christopher wants to meet tomorrow," she said, her voice wavering. "He's furious I'm going behind his back." Henry closed his eyes, exhaustion hitting him. "We'll face him together," he said. If Christopher brought an army of lawyers, well, Henry wasn't entirely sure how they'd prevail. But one look at Anna's determined expression and a silent vow formed in his heart no matter what. Lucy would be safe, and Anna would be free. They chose the school auditorium for neutral ground. Early the next morning, Henry escorted Lucy to class before joining Anna, Ms. Alvarez, and Detective Park in the small lobby outside the gym. The overhead lights flickered, reminiscent of Henry's maintenance woes. A handful of local reporters, carefully selected by Anna, waited with notebooks and cameras. The atmosphere was tense but calm, no swarming paparazzi, no flashing bulbs. Anna wore a simple knee-length dress and a borrowed sweater from Ms. Alvarez, eschewing her once lavish wardrobe. Detective Park stood discreetly at the side, prepared to intervene if anything went awry. Ms. Alvarez hovered near a table stacked with coffee cups, offering warm smiles. Henry paced near the bleachers, hands shoved in his pockets, running through what he might say. He'd never spoken to the press before, never had to defend his right to raise his own child. Right on cue, Christopher Reed swept in with two lawyers flanking him. He cut an imposing figure in a tailored suit, his eyes scanning the room as if it were a business acquisition. The attorneys carried thick files, presumably stuffed with legal intimidation. But Henry noticed something else in Christopher's expression, a hint of genuine worry beneath the corporate polish, as though even he wasn't entirely sure how things had come to this point. Anna stepped forward first, addressing the small knot of reporters. "Thank you for coming. I asked you here because there's been a lot of speculation about my disappearance and recent rescue. I'd like to clear the air." She gestured to Henry, who approached hesitantly. Cameras turned toward him, but the flash was minimal. "This is Henry Cooper, the man who saved my life at Lake Harriet. He's a single father, a veteran, and one of the kindest people I've ever met. I am not filing any lawsuit, nor seeking damages. On the contrary, I am here to express my gratitude and my intention to remain independent of Reed Industries." Christopher's jaw tightened, and a reporter seized on the moment. "Ms. Reed, is it true you're stepping away from your family's company? What about your obligations as an heir?" Anna looked at Christopher for a long beat. "Family obligations shouldn't mean losing your sense of self. I respect my father's achievements, but I cannot be forced into an engagement or a corporate role I never wanted. I've found something more precious, my own path." Another reporter aimed a question at Henry. "Mr. Cooper, how do you respond to allegations that your living situation is unstable for your daughter?" Henry's muscles tensed. He took a breath. "I work 2 jobs to provide for Lucy. We have a modest apartment. Yes, but we pay our bills. Lucy is top of her class, healthy, and surrounded by good neighbors. That's the reality. Anna Reed's presence in our home has only been as a friend, someone who needed a place to recuperate from the media storm." Christopher cleared his throat. Stepping forward, "I'm concerned for my sister's well-being and for the reputation of our family. We're prepared to support Anna in any capacity, financial or otherwise, so long as she upholds her responsibilities." Anna squared her shoulders. "My responsibilities are to live authentically. Christopher, if you truly care about me, you'll let me go." A hush fell, broken only by the scribbling of reporters' pens. For once, Christopher had no polished script to rely on. The tension was palpable, and Henry wondered if this confrontation would escalate. But then Ms. Alvarez stepped in, offering Christopher a cup of coffee with a kind, maternal smile. He accepted it almost reflexively, as though disarmed by her warmth. The next steps would be critical. Would the Reeds retaliate legally, or would they finally relent? Henry braced himself, remembering Lucy's face that morning, her quiet confidence as she said, "You'll do great, Daddy. Everything is for her." He reminded himself, everything. In the aftermath of that tense gathering, the media narrative shifted. Rather than painting Henry as a gold-digging opportunist, several local outlets highlighted the genuine kindness he had shown a working-class father saving a stranger on the ice. Anna's candid interview moved public opinion. Many found her desire for a normal life relatable, even admirable. The more sensational tabloids still sniffed around, but their claims seemed outlandish compared to the modest reality being presented. However, Christopher's next move caught everyone off guard. He quietly withdrew the legal motion that challenged Henry's fitness as a parent. Word filtered through Detective Park, who learned that Christopher's lawyers had filed a request to dismiss. The reason was unclear, perhaps a strategic retreat, or perhaps a rare flicker of familial concern for Anna's happiness. Either way, Henry felt a crushing weight lift from his shoulders when he heard the news. Even with that threat gone, Anna knew she couldn't remain in Miss Alvarez's living room indefinitely. She needed a place of her own, a more permanent step toward independence. Over late-night mugs of tea, she and Henry pored over rental listings. Money wasn't the problem. She had access to some funds in a personal account, not under Reed Industries' direct control. "I want something near Lucy's school," she said, circling a humble one-bedroom apartment in the local ads. "I want to be part of a real community." Henry felt a pang he couldn't quite name, both relief that Anna wouldn't be on the streets and a twinge of sadness. Over the past weeks, Lucy had grown attached, often asking Anna for help with art projects or reading bedtime stories. Henry had grown used to seeing Anna in the kitchen, hair messy, wearing one of the Alvarez's aprons. But he reminded himself she wasn't leaving their lives, just establishing her own space. "She deserves that," he told himself. "We all do." One afternoon, Lucy declared she had a surprise. She guided Anna and Henry to Miss Alvarez's dining table, where she'd spread out sheets of colored paper. It was a large, childlike tableau illustrating their journey, a picture of Henry pulling Anna from the ice, another of Anna reading with Lucy, and a final scene of them standing together in front of an auto garage, an idea Lucy had come up with after hearing Henry complain about the limited hours and constraints of his second job. "Why not start your own shop?" Daddy Lucy asked innocently, as though it were the easiest thing in the world. Henry chuckled. "I wouldn't know the first thing about running a business." "Lucy," Anna leaned in, eyes sparkling, "but you do know how to fix cars, and maybe we can learn the rest together." The suggestion hung in the air like a spark. Henry looked at Anna, seeing unspoken excitement behind her shy smile. For a moment, he dared to imagine a better future, one where he wasn't a janitor by day, garage worker by night, always exhausted, always scraping by. One where Lucy could come after school, do her homework while he tinkered under a hood, and Anna could handle the books or greet customers with that disarming warmth she carried. Yet the dream felt impossibly large. "I don't have the capital," Henry began, but Anna put a hand on his arm. "I do, at least enough to get started. And it's not charity, it's an investment in you, in Lucy, in something real. I left my family fortune behind, but I still have resources. Let me help." Miss Alvarez, standing nearby, chimed in. "Sometimes God sends an unexpected angel." "Henry," he exhaled, torn between pride and possibility. Lucy grinned wide, urging him on. In that moment, his heart cracked open to the idea that maybe, just maybe, they could build something together, forging a new kind of family along the way. They found a small, abandoned service station on the outskirts of town. Near Lucy's school, a rickety structure with 2 garage bays, peeling paint, and more potential than Henry dared to admit. The owners, an elderly couple wanting to retire, were willing to sell cheaply. With Anna's funds, the purchase went through smoothly. Papers were signed, and the keys changed hands on a crisp afternoon while Lucy cheered, skipping around the gravel lot, delighted by the echo of her own voice in the empty space. As the new owners, Henry and Anna spent every spare hour scrubbing oil stains, repairing broken fixtures, and repainting the worn signage. Lucy helped by adding small decorative touches, a hand-drawn logo taped to the window, crayon sketches of wrenches and hearts. Ms. Alvarez pitched in with homemade lunches, humming with approval whenever she saw Henry teaching Anna the basics of engine repair. Their days became a blur of physical labor and small triumphs, like getting the ancient lift to function properly or discovering a trove of spare parts behind a creaky shelf. Outside of the shop, life carried on. Lucy continued her classes, blossoming into a bright child who excelled in art. Detective Park checked in occasionally, more as a friend than an officer, commenting on how the media storm had finally begun to calm. Christopher, too, had made himself scarce. Though Henry suspected he still watched from a distance, Anna seemed lighter, as though shedding the burden of corporate expectations. She studied budgeting and basic accounting, determined to do more than just stand at the front desk. "I want to be able to fix a flat tire or change the oil if a customer needs it," she joked, only half serious. One evening, after a long day at the shop, the three of them returned to the modest apartment building. Anna now officially rented a small one-bedroom 2 floors above Ms. Alvarez, but she often found her way to Henry's for dinner. Lucy, already in pajamas, was bouncing with excitement over some new project at school. As Henry cooked a simple meal of spaghetti and meat sauce, Lucy passed out crayons so Anna could illustrate a grand opening flyer. Anna's eyes sparkled with creativity, a side of her that had been stifled by fancy boardrooms and elaborate social events. They teased Henry about the name. Cooper and Reed Auto, or Anna and Henry's service station. Lucy scrunched her nose. That's boring. She held up a rough sketch, Cooper and Family Auto Repair, where you and your car feel at home. Henry chuckled. That's a lot of words, Lucy. But Anna pointed out that it conveyed warmth and belonging, precisely what they wanted. Family. The word lingered, carrying layers of meaning. Henry wasn't sure if it was too soon to call them a family, yet the sense of partnership, of shared goals, of a bond forming between them all, was undeniable. After Lucy went to bed, Anna helped Henry wash dishes. Their hands brushed in the soapy water, a fleeting intimacy that made his heart flutter like a teenager. He glanced at her hair messy in a ponytail, cheeks flushed from the steam, and found her more captivating than any memory of high society glamour. She caught his stare and smiled, a question in her eyes. "What?" He set down a plate, drying his hands. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." Anna leaned closer, her voice just above a whisper. "You saved me first," she reminded him. "Now it's my turn to save you whether you like it or not." A soft laugh escaped Henry's lips, mingling with a current of unspoken affection. In that tiny kitchen, overshadowed by daily struggles and big dreams, something profoundly real was taking shape. The day of the grand opening dawned bright and clear, a rarity in the Minnesota winter. They'd chosen a Saturday so Lucy could be there all day, handing out homemade cookies Ms. Alvarez had baked. Word had spread quietly but effectively. A few local folks came by to see the new family-run auto repair shop. Detective Park stopped in with her squeaky cruiser, complaining about a brake noise. Anna insisted on offering a discount, ignoring Henry's amused eye roll. They hung a freshly painted sign above the entrance, Cooper and Family Auto Repair, with a smaller tagline in Lucy's handwriting below, "Where every fix is a new start." Lucy preened with pride, pointing it out to every customer. Over in the waiting area, Anna had arranged a cozy corner with secondhand chairs, a small coffee table, and an array of children's books, her nod to the fact that many parents end up waiting with kids in tow. Henry felt a surge of gratitude with each handshake, each introduction. Neighbors who once knew him only as a quiet single father now saw him as a small business owner, determined, capable, and backed by an unlikely partner. Anna, for her part, glowed with an understated confidence. Gone were the anxious glances over her shoulder, replaced by an earnest willingness to greet anyone who walked through their doors. She even wore a light layer of engine grease on her cheek, a testament to her growing mechanical knowledge. Christopher didn't show, but Henry suspected it was for the best. They didn't need a corporate cloud over their celebration. By mid-afternoon, business slowed, and Lucy dragged a folding chair outside to soak up the rare sunshine. Henry watched from the bay door as Anna joined Lucy, the two chatting animatedly. He walked over, heart full, and heard Lucy say, Daddy always wanted his own shop, but he never thought he'd get one. Anna touched Lucy's shoulder gently. Sometimes people just need someone else to believe in them. Lucy nodded, her tone solemn. I wish Mom was here to see this. She looked at Henry with a mixture of longing and happiness. Do you think she'd be proud? Henry crouched beside them, voice thick. Your mom was proud of us before we even knew how to dream this big. Lucy beamed, and Anna placed a comforting hand on Henry's arm. In that moment, the swirl of noise around them, cars passing. The hum of the shop's compressor fell away, leaving only the quiet understanding that life had chapters yet to be written, and they were writing a new one together. Sensing the emotional heft, Henry cleared his throat. All right, ladies, who's up for a quick test drive? I want to see how our new sign looks from the road. Lucy jumped up excitedly. Anna grinned, brushing that dab of grease off her cheek at last. They piled into an old pickup Henry had recently refurbished, our shop truck. Lucy had dubbed it. As they drove down the street and circled back, Lucy leaned out the passenger window, whooping with delight as the sign came into full view. Anna snapped a photo on her phone, no press, no corporate spin, just a memory for them. I'll treasure this, she whispered. Henry glanced at her. Your old life, do you ever miss it? She took a moment, gazing at Lucy in the back seat, hugging a bag of leftover cookies. Then Anna smiled, shaking her head softly. I'd miss this more. The words struck Henry like a quiet revelation. She had chosen them, chosen him, chosen Lucy, chosen a simpler life. And in that choice, they found a bond deeper than any contract or blood tie. Family, he realized, wasn't just a label, it was an act of faith. Spring arrived, melting the last patches of ice on Lake Harriet. And with the warmer weather came another milestone. Lucy's school planned a small celebration for local entrepreneurs who were parents of students. Henry had been invited to speak a short, casual presentation about Cooper and family auto repair. The thought of public speaking made his stomach churn. But Lucy insisted. It's your chance to show everyone how cool you are. Daddy, she teased. The event took place in the school's modest auditorium, the same space where months earlier they had confronted Christopher and the swirl of reporters. Now the crowd was friendly teachers, parents, and bright-eyed children. Henry stood at a simple podium, voice trembling at first, but warming as he described how the dream of owning a shop came true. Anna stood off to the side, offering him an encouraging nod, and Lucy beamed from the front row. He concluded by saying, sometimes when life cracks open the ice beneath you, you find something worth holding on to. That's what happened to me, both literally and figuratively. A wave of applause rose, and Lucy dashed onto the stage with a large construction paper sign reading, "Thank you for saving all of us." Daddy. The words made Henry's throat tighten. Anna joined them, and for a moment the three stood together, a small family formed by choice and circumstance, bound by a deep current of care. They bowed awkwardly as the applause continued, blushing and laughing. This time there were no lawyers with thick files, no menacing threats in the background, just acceptance and gratitude. After the ceremony, parents and teachers mingled. Detective Park, who had come as a friend, shook Henry's hand. You really turned things around, she said. Henry shrugged, glancing at Anna, who was showing Lucy how to hang the sign near a hallway display of student art. We turned things around, he corrected with a smile. Ms. Alvarez bustled over, offering lemon bars from a Tupperware container. She winked at Henry. I see a ring on Anna's finger might be the next big announcement. She teased. Henry nearly choked. He hadn't proposed, hadn't even fully considered it, but the notion felt less impossible than it once might have. A soft cheer from the small stage drew their attention. Lucy was beckoning them over. She'd pinned up her homemade sign and was proudly showing Anna's doodles from the shop's early days. Henry and Anna walked over, exchanging a glance laced with unspoken possibility. Surrounded by children's laughter and pastel artworks, life felt full of promise. Later, they decided to walk home past Lake Harriet. The ice was gone, replaced by rippling water that shimmered under a gentle evening sun. Lucy skipped ahead, collecting small stones. Anna paused at the shoreline, remembering the moment she'd fallen through the ice, so certain that no one would come for her. Now she squeezed Henry's hand, the memory distant yet still poignant. "You jumped into the cold for me," she murmured. "I'd do it again," he said, meaning every word. They stood there for a while, letting Lucy toss stones into the lake and giggle at the splash. The journey that had begun with an act of desperate rescue had evolved into something neither had imagined: a flourishing business, a new family, and a life tethered not by wealth or status, but by daily acts of devotion. As the sun dipped low, Henry slipped an arm around Anna's shoulders, Lucy running back to them with a grin that rivaled the sunset's glow. The three walked away from the water's edge together, leaving behind the faint echoes of a winter tragedy. In its place stood a springtime promise that where one life nearly ended, another life full of warmth, love, and unbreakable bonds had truly begun. Life has a strange way of bringing people together, sometimes through tragedy, sometimes through hope. He had risked everything that cold morning, stepping onto the ice, unsure if he'd ever make it back. She had risked even more, walking away from comfort and privilege to seek something real, something true. Together, they discovered that family isn't always about blood or birthright. Sometimes it's simply about choice. They had lost so much peace, anonymity, the quiet lives they'd carefully built. But in return, they found courage, a second chance, and a new family forged from trust and shared sacrifice. The ice had almost claimed one life, yet ultimately gave birth to another. In that small garage, beneath flickering lights and the scent of motor oil, they built more than just a business, they built a home. As seasons changed and wounds healed, the lake remained still and silent, keeping the secrets of that winter morning. And as the sun set over the city, warming their world, one quiet question lingered in the soft evening air. If fate offered you a chance to risk everything for the life you truly wanted, would you take that step onto the ice?